Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. The Knife Raven here, back again with another video. And in today's video, I'll be talking about another Thiers knife. Now, as you can probably tell, I quite like these knives, and I bought quite a few of them not too long ago at Kent of Inglewood, and so far I've been greatly enjoying them. So first and foremost, this knife I was supposed to review over a week ago, but it got delayed, so here it is now, and I hope it doesn't disappoint. Got my cup of masala chai over here, and without further ado, let's discuss this very interesting regional French knife. So to start off, this knife is made by Issard, which, as I've said before, is a very well-known French steelcraft manufacturer. They make various types of scissors, straight razors, folding knives, and the such. And their pocket knives, particularly the knives of our grandfathers, which is this emblem right here, they are some of the highest craftsmanship among the Issard's line, and granted, they are inexpensive budget knives, but at the same time, for the price, they are actually very nice and would make for great everyday carry knives. Now, of course, Thiers is the blade capital of France, like the Moniago or Sheffield or Solingen of France, and they even have their own knife pattern, the Thiers knife, also in this case made by Issard. But this is actually not from Thiers. This is a regional pattern from, I believe, southern France. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's from southern France. Southwestern, if I remember correctly. And it is known as the Kenavo, or Kenavo. I am very bad with my French pronunciation, so please correct me if that is incorrect. In the meantime, the Kenavo, or Kenavo, is a slip joint knife with a very, very nice half stop. You can see there's a lot of strength in this spring. And do be careful if you have this knife, or any Thiers knife, that it is quite often that the blade will hit the inside of the spring and it will chip. So please walk the blade down instead of snapping it shut. I made this mistake with some of my older knives, such as a La Guiole I have, and there's some slight chipping now on the blade. However, here, I've taken care to, ever since I received this knife, to walk the blade down just for that safety purpose. In the meantime, this blade does have a nail nick. It's a bit of a small nail nick, but it works nonetheless. Although I do prefer to pinch this knife open because of the large amount of exposed blade. And this is a very unique blade shape, I must say. It's kind of a drop point, clip point, spear hybrid, and I really, really like it. Very, very infrequent to see. And the reason I say clip drop spear is because it has the dip that you'd expect from a traditional clip point. It has the full belly and kind of aimed down tip of a drop point, but it also has the somewhat symmetry of a spear point. And thankfully, I actually have all three of these blade shapes here to describe what I mean. First and foremost, there is the clip point. As you can see, there is this dip, which leads up to this very, very sharp point right there. And you can see that the Kenavo sort of has that, but instead of going back up, it just kind of stays down, which is not traditional for a clip point. Next up, we have the spear point, which, as you can see, is a more symmetrical blade that kind of tapers down to a fine point at the front. And this sort of has that, but at the same time, this dip is quite unnatural for a spear point. And lastly, a drop point, which is an upswept, kind of curved blade with a very noticeable belly. It has similarities, but again, it isn't quite right. And that's the thing I like about this knife. It isn't normal. This is not the kind of knife that you would traditionally expect to see. And I quite like that. It has its own uniqueness, and that uniqueness elevates its value in my mind. But enough about the odd blade shape. This knife is quite interesting. It has a fair bit of history behind it, of which I am no expert. All I know is that this knife was favored by sailors and fishermen, partially because of the fact that, well, the large blade does make for a good rope cutter, but also because this end cap here, which may just look like it's for show, is actually meant to tamper a pipe, which is quite the interesting little feature. And you can imagine sailors and fishermen are probably wanting a larger blade that is good for cutting rope, and who knows, maybe a tamper to help with their pipe smoking. So there is that. But nonetheless, this has a nail nick. Again, as I said, not the deepest. You can just pinch the blade open. And on the blade, you have the Knives of Our Grandfathers logo. You have the initials of the founder with the crown. And it says 12C27. Again, extremely common French steel. Almost all the French knives I have are in 12C27. Good steel, reliable enough. For the people who are complaining it's not super steel, this is a $30 knife. Why are you complaining? And it does say in quite the small font, there you are, made in France. So this is completely authentic, made in Thiers by Thiers Issard. So aside from having a very, very unorthodox and very uncommon blade shape, having the nice logo and such on the blade, this has a nice satin finish. It is quite sharp, I would say. I haven't done a cutting test on this one yet, but I have used it a little, so if that counts as a cutting test, it is quite sharp with the factory edge. Also, the whole blade wrap concern can be avoided if you just walk the edge down. So instead of just snapping the blade, you just guide it down so that it won't chip the inside of the spring, which is, as I said, something that a lot of French knives do. For example, the Ronet, and to a lesser degree, the Thiers. The bolsters are very, very nice. They are brushed stainless steel with some nice grooves in them. Very nice design. Almost has the vague shape of a Coke bottle, which is an American pattern. It's got 4 stainless steel pins, which is not common. Normally knives like this would have 3. Stainless steel liners, stainless steel back spring with a little nice complement of some partial guillochage, or file work, as many of my viewers would probably know it. And my favorite feature about this knife, well, aside from the blade, is the handle. When I bought this, I bought it from Kenavo wood, and they only had 2 handle materials. One was boxwood, which is a much lighter colored timber, which kind of almost has a similar shade as this table here. But I went with this option, snakewood. Now the unfortunate thing is, whether it's the lighting or it's just the current piece of wood, you can't really see the grain very well in this knife, and that I wouldn't consider it a complaint. I mean, it still looks beautiful, but snakewood is very particular in its grain pattern, and for that reason, that's probably why most people like it, because it's that almost snake scale grain in the wood, and unfortunately, this piece doesn't showcase that too well. And again, the lighting probably doesn't help, but nonetheless, even without the poor lighting, it's still rather tricky to see. But nonetheless, it is a nice piece of wood, very smooth, doesn't seem to have any chips or dings in it. But no, very nice. I quite like this piece of wood. And I do think that snakewood, which is a more exotic species of tree, on a $30 knife is kind of a steal either way. Now, I've been mostly complimentary, talking about how much I like the blade shape and the almost Coke bottle fishtail hybrid for the handle, but now it's time to discuss the problems. Now, first and foremost, tiny bit of blade play. Probably can't even see it, but it's still there. Not anything to lose sleep over. I've seen much worse blade play in my time. Go watch my worst knives video. That's a horror show. But there's a bit of blade play here. Not a huge complaint, but certainly not perfect, and before you say it's a $30 knife, yes, but the Opinel number 6, which is also a $30 knife, doesn't have any blade play, so there is that. Next up, the next flaw, which isn't really a flaw, it's more just cosmetic here. There's a little piece of wood that sticks out, and it kind of goes over the bolster, and I thought this was just some sort of smudge or some oil on the bolster, but unfortunately it's not. It seems like in one section the wood overlaps a little. Now, of course, I am getting into ludicrously unimportant details. This is completely unnecessary. You can stare at it from here and you probably can't even see that. Now, yeah, but I do want to be honest with my review, and if I see something that I'm not a huge fan of, I will mention it. So there is that little bit of a odd fitting from the scale, and there is the little bit of blade play. Of course, I could complain about the whole ease of getting blade wrap, but what's the point in doing that, because that's just part of the design. The next issue I have with the blade play is that while the centering is in itself not bad, I guess, the blade play means that you can move the blade, and when you move it, there's a bit of steel right underneath the blade, which means when you accidentally bump this knife if it's in your pocket, this is what you hear. There's this squeak of that uneasy scrape of the metal. And again, this is purely cosmetic. It doesn't matter, really. It doesn't actually seem to have damaged the edge either, but it's just a bit irritating. And blade play in and of itself is something I don't like, but when it starts to cause issues in the closed position, that's when I begin to really, really dislike it. The spring sits a little bit proud, but I mean, it's a half stop, so it sits flush when the blade is closed or open. Actually, it sits a little low when it's closed. Which brings me to the next flaw that I just noticed. Very big gap. Now, granted, this partially could be because the spring is sitting low, but even if I raise the spring up, you can still see there is a gap here. That's a pretty big gap, if you ask me. It kind of ruins the seamlessness of that guillochage, which I will admit is a little awkward. It's just kind of at the back of the knife with no necessary reason for it. But I guess that it's a little compliment to the knife and embellishment. But if I had to choose to either have the guillochage or have no gaps and no blade play, I'd take the latter any day of the week. But yeah, you have one pretty big gap here. Again, this can vary per model, but I'm just reviewing mine. If mine's good, I'll say it's good. If mine's bad, well, I'll say it's bad. And I'm not saying this is a bad knife. This is, again, just cosmetic, but it does kind of look ugly. So, bit of a gap, slightly proud spring, although that's the least of the flaws. Blade play, squeaky blade, and well, actually, this is the smallest of flaws, really. That little bit of wood overextending onto the bolster. But, I mean, that's not even a flaw. That's just me being picky at that point. But aside from these flaws, is this still a good working knife? Yes. Is it still a good fisherman's knife? Probably. I don't fish. Is this a good gent's knife? I'd say so. It doesn't look too scary. It's still reasonably small. It's got some nice fancy complements. It's very elegant. And is it a good budget knife? Yes. Yes, it is. Would I take it over an Opinel number 6 in Paducah? No, but I'm heavily biased towards this knife as it's one of my favorite knives of all time. So saying that I think this is better is partially just my bias, but I still will say this is a little bit of a better purchase. Although, for those who can't have a locking knife, the Opinel is pretty much useless. And for those who want a slip joint, particularly a stronger, heavier duty slip joint with a half stop, this knife does have you covered. So, all in all, oh, and I've completely forgotten to talk about this. As with a lot of the Issard knives, or at least all the ones I bought, it does come with a nice black leather slip, which is, again, of decent quality, and you can just use this to pop the knife into the slip, and this does kind of fix the whole squeaky blade issue. Even if it's bumping around the pocket, you wouldn't really hear anything because the slip is keeping everything nice and tightly sealed away. Very nice, very easy way to carry your knife, and it's included with your purchase, so great little extra thing to add on. So my final thoughts, what are they? Well, blade steel, again, perfectly good, perfectly fine for what you're buying. I have no issue with it. Markings on the blade, I think, are well enough done. They don't make the knife look ugly in my mind. They kind of add some uniqueness to it. I like the crown particularly. Half stop action is excellent. Blade doesn't sit proud. Centering is all right. Pins are flush. Blade play could be worse, but it's still there. Factory edge is decent. Blade performance is excellent. Ergonomics are a little odd with the end cap, but I still think they are overall very positive. Spring retention is good. Guillochage is well executed. The end cap is perfectly seamlessly done. No gaps in between. And the handle is very exotic, despite being quite inexpensive. So all in all, for an inexpensive budget fisherman/sailor's knife that just oozes history and tradition, I think this is a great buy. Again, I got it on sale for the Black Friday deals at Kent of Inglewood. I got it along with the Ronet in Juniper, the Nogent, which I don't have right here, and one special knife from Issard that is going to be the last of my series of current knives for this brand until further notice. And here's a teaser for next video. This is easily my favorite of all of the ones I bought, and you may be able to tell why already, but this is going to be the next video, and I can't wait to talk about this knife. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Great little budget knife. Would I pick it over an Opinel? No. Would I pick it over the average Schrade or Rough Rider? Yeah, probably. Would I pick it over, I don't know, another Issard knife? That's debatable. I like them both equally. But nonetheless, thank you very much for watching. This has been a very interesting little knife, and let me know what you think of it. So, thank you very much for watching. This has been the Knife Raven. As always, signing off. Goodbye.